everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I'm so excited to do a VR to Auntie Kay's Tarot Insights decks for Witchy Desires. I saw Peekaboo Rose release her video and I watched hers, and after watching Peekaboo Rose's, I went over to Auntie Kay's Tarot Insights and I took a look at her decks for Witchy Desires, hashtag Halloween Countdown. So watching both of theirs and not being able to sleep, and then thinking which decks would I fill if I did the same thing, just launched me out of bed. And now I'm here to share with you my decks for Witchy Desires. And this will be my first VR, technically my official VR on my channel. And so I hope you enjoy it. And definitely go check out the other two channels because they had some very unique decks that inspired me. So the first prompt for decks for Witchy Desires is my familiar deck. And my familiar deck, or what I think is essentially my essence, is the Tarot of the Abyss. And so this deck, when I use this deck, I feel completely connected to myself, and a lot of the images in it, something that I just feel deeply immersed in this world here. So it's kind of like a go-to, but I wouldn't want to call this my soul deck because I'm not as definitive about stuff like that. But to say it speaks to my soul, I guess you could probably say soul deck. So I've referred to this before as my like ride or die deck. And it definitely has that very deep, dark energy. It definitely feels like a lone wolf deck to me. And that is how I would describe myself. It's powerful. I've had powerful readings with this. I usually journal with this deck. It's definitely my companion. So that's my familiar deck, Tarot of the Abyss. So the next prompt is my Jack-o'-lantern deck, a deck that's eerily or creatively illuminating. So for this category, I chose two decks. No surprise that one of them is the Traveler Oracle. So that is one of my Jack-o'-lantern decks because it's eerily or creatively illuminating. And the other deck I chose is the Wild Unknown Archetypes deck. There we go. And so this is my other eerily and illuminating Jack-o'-lantern deck. Funny that the Wild Unknown Archetypes is a Jack-o'-lantern deck because I don't think it's a popular deck. I know some people like it. I've seen it. A lot of people tend to rehome this deck because it isn't really an intuitive deck as far as being able to look at images and interpret much from what you see. But I think what makes this a very powerful deck, very eerily spot on, is the guidebook that comes along with it. And while I do like the images a lot, it reminds me when I used to do collage scrapbooking from magazines. But what I really like about this deck is it leaves me scratching my head. And for some that may not be a good thing, but for me it helps create a jumping off point to think deeper or further than usual. Usually the book has a lot of great information in it. I have written I believe it's the page number that I wrote. Yeah, page numbers. down at the bottom so that I can access the information pretty quickly. And this is definitely a deck that I would keep with the book to use. Although when you flip to an image, you get a general impression from it. And it doesn't have to convey anything accurately. It just has to make its presence known through the image. And I think it does that very well. For people who might be looking to interpret this accurately, that may be a challenge. This is something that you can try to interpret from just the keyword and the image. And if you don't care about being accurate according to the book, then it can be very intuitive. And so the Traveler's Oracle I've showed quite a bit already because it's kind of the one that I keep with me wherever I go, on my nightstand. It's actually the first thing that I tend to grab. I'll grab this deck and then an accompanying tarot deck when I work with it. So originally it had white borders. I cut them off and put the title down there. And what's really great about this deck as well is the guidebook that comes with it. Very deep, profound insights. Definitely something I can't find in other decks or other books so far. Still looking. So these are my jack-o'-lantern decks. Eerily, I would say, is this one, and creatively is this one, Illuminating. Okay, the third prompt is my broom deck, which helps me fly or get to where I'm going. And so that's going to be a deck that also is a go-to, and that I can read with quickly. This is the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot. I love the vibrancy of this deck. When you put out a spread to do a reading, it's just face value, I feel like, is a good word to describe it. And so if I want to sweep up a reading really quick with my broom deck, this is going to be the one. It's pretty popular, so I won't be showing too much, but Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot for my broom deck. Okay, so the fourth prompt is cleans out the cobwebs deck. And I interpreted it two ways. One is that it provides clarity to the point. But that could also be broom deck, but I see this more as like no question. And the other one I interpreted as more of like shaking off the cobwebs, so kind of I guess making me feel more awake, so it awakens me or enlivens me. So the one that I picked for, you know, straight to the point, shaking the cobwebs off, you know, there's pure clarity, is my Soul Trees, the Dreamer's Journey, Major Arcana Oracle. So basically it's an oracle deck, but it has the Major Arcana in it. And so this deck I got really lucky with. I saw it in on a YouTube channel, and I went looking for it and then found out it was out of print, and then magically came across it. There was one on eBay and it was a little bit pricey, but to me this is irreplaceable. It just really hits home, and it kind of wraps me in its I guess stillness and vulnerability and depth. And it's very real and honest. It doesn't just stay light and positive. It goes to some darker areas. So that was kind of like bringing clarity, dusting off cobwebs. And the other one is kind of when you dust off the cobwebs and it wants to wake you up. That's going to be the Mystical Dream Tarot. Again, not typically a popular one, but I like that this one wakes me up. And it does that with not only the images, but also the guidebook. It's got this very dreamy, ethereal vibe to it. It's still very naturey, but in a very dark, ominous way. It kind of, I would put in the category of the Edgar Allan Poe tarot, which I still have, but that one I was going to rehome once I got the new Poe tarot. And I put it in that category because it can be a little frustrating to try to interpret from just what you see on the card, because it doesn't always match with what we typically know the card meaning to be. But I think that's the draw for me. And the book definitely addresses what is seen and how it is interpreted and why it is there. And so even if it doesn't directly match what I'm seeing with the title, I think that's part of the allure of it, because it takes you into the dreamscape when you read it in the book. And, you know, I am a book lover, so I'm not opposed to reading books. So far, I've mentioned quite a few decks where I'm reading books, but I think that just adds, you know, another layer of interpretation and deeper insight. And that's fun. So that was Cleaning Out the Cobwebs. Okay, so the next deck is my Golden Thread Tarot. This one is going to hit the Cauldron deck prompt, which basically is a deck that helps to stir up the magic. And this is one of my first, like, oh, I have to have this deck because it just really checks all the boxes for me. It's kind of a minimalist deck. It's got this Luxe Gold shine to it, but it's still very detailed. So even though it's primarily very flat images and not overly done so, it has a lot there, at least for me. And so when I use this, this definitely brings out the magic. This deck feels very mysterious and secretive and still very naturey, you know? It's interesting how it was still able to do that in a very minimalist way. The Lover's card. Seven of Pentacles. I mean, you definitely get a feeling of growth here. Almost like leveling up of skills before mastery. And so I just love the nakedness of it. It's naked and aesthetic, and literally as well. And definitely one of my favorites. Look at that Hermit card. Wow. Hypnotic. All right, so the next prompt is honoring, remembering, or remembrance, or quiet deck. And so that is going to be Tarot the Complete Kit. And why? Why is this one the honoring, remembering, quiet deck? Because this is the deck that inspired, and it's where it all began. It's where my interest for it happened when I was a young person. And so I put all my favorite images in the front so that you can see why I love this deck. But again, it's very simplistic, but it's not hard to interpret and see, and sometimes it kind of does it in a very unique way. And for such a fun, colorful deck, it's very poignant. Like some of my favorite cards, the Judgment card, the key to everlasting life or a purpose. I like this Six of Pentacles, kind of like a giving or breaking of bread. Ace of Wands, Passion. Four of Swords. So this is a really fun deck, and when I use this deck, it just brings me back remembering not just when my relationship with this deck began, but just the whole context of getting into tarot and what that meant for me and what that meant for others. It's a great Nine of Wands. Look at this Hermit card. Super cool. Nine of Swords. And I love this Three of Swords. It's just such a unique perspective. Ouch. The Moon. Love this Eight of Pentacles. So yeah, this is my remembering, honoring, quiet deck. Whoops, not so quiet. Okay, so this next one's going to be a fun one for me. The next prompt is flat out Witchy or Halloween deck. And for me, that is the Compendium of Witches Oracle. And this one is such a beautiful deck. Basically, it's, well, instead of me paraphrasing, because I'll probably mess it up, I just want to read this first part here. Deck is based on A Compendium of Witches, an art book published in 2019 which features stories and portraits of fictional witches from across the world in various carefully researched historic settings. I don't have the book, but I think I'd love to get it. I think it was a little pricey at the time, and I could only afford the deck. So basically, it's split into two piles, one being witches and the other being tools, or even places. So basically, if you can't read the titles, the Laborer, Mountain, the Soothsayer, Rest, the Reconciler, Thaw. This is just such a potent deck. The Hermit, Moon. I love the imagery. It's beautiful. The Companion, Familiar. Every single card, the Memory, Light, means something to me. It's significant. The Comforter, Autumn. Stargazer, Roots. Look at this card, just seems so raw and earthy. The Alchemist, Mirror. And so if you look in the book, it has a little excerpt for the witch, kind of gives a little history about the witch, and then talks a little bit about what's going on in the card and a message. There's also keywords, and then towards the back are the tools. And then so those have a just keywords, much shorter description. Mystic, Cauldron, the Seer, Pomegranate, the Wind Rider, Hair. These are matching up pretty good. The Veil Walker, Pruning, or cutting back the veil. The Healer, Bee. The Priestess, Temperance. The Scholar, Cornucopia. The Wayfarer, Storm. The Crossroads, Wreath. The Listener, Offering. And so I think I'll stop there, but if you haven't checked out this deck, it's probably one of my favorite oracles if I want to connect to feminine witchy vibes. I love it. I can see myself in a lot of these archetypes. Okay. That was a Compendium of Witches Oracle. And that's for my flat out witchy or Halloween deck. So the next prompt is the Sweet Treat deck. So something that's a treat. And this is no surprise that I have my Boo Tarot. And I also have the Trick or Treat Tarot. So, what are these treat decks? And I've shown them before, so I think in like my first ever video. Well, for one, they're a treat because they make me happy. And another, candy and cute ghosts. And so this is just a very light-spirited deck, the Boo Tarot, and it was done very beautifully for Halloween. I feel so lucky to have this. I never imagined that I would be able to find kind of a cutesy, childlike storybook deck that I can connect with. But this one, to me, is very precious. And this is a treat because it makes me smile. Oh, or feel compassion or empathy for the characters or the ghosts. I just love it. I wish I had a storybook that went along with it. So this one's definitely a sweet treat to have. And also along with that, and I just got both of these decks, but Boo Tarot was an instant love. And then this one, I mean, sweet treat is because it takes me back to being a kid on Halloween and going trick-or-treating. And I was very, very sad when I was a teenager and I went trick-or-treating and I dressed up and we went to get candy. I think I was like 15. And for me, it was just the tradition of what I did on Halloween. And I would even make my friends, hey, let's go trick-or-treating, even if they didn't want to. And, you know, someone was like, oh, you're too old, and refused to give candy and slammed the door in our face. And, you know, kind of like broke my heart because at 15, I still wanted a trick-or-treat. And I considered it a good thing that instead of smashing pumpkins, I was trick-or-treating. So this one takes me back to when I was a kid and it was okay to dress up and trick-or-treat and be a kid again. And yes, I did TP someone's house once before. So, and yes, that's because we weren't trick-or-treating on Halloween. So I love this deck. Takes me back. Glad I have it. Definitely a treat. Okay, for the Ugly Cozy Sweater deck. That's the 9th prompt. I have 2. because one is really ugly and the other one is only slightly ugly, but not ugly to me. So what I have here is Spiral Tarot, which is a deck I love to use. I kind of think it's my like little Radiant Rider-Waite, but just like an older 80s version. Actually, I'm not really sure when this was published, but that's the vibe I get from this deck. And to me, well, I love the artwork, and I love the mood of this deck, and it's definitely cozy when I want to be in that darker, deeper, moody blue. Moody blues is a good way to put it. Let me turn this around. But, you know, it's not the most attractive deck. The characters in it is not the most attractive either. And some people probably don't even like looking at it, but to me, I don't know, it's just, it's grown on me like an ugly sweater. It's grown on me. And it feels very magical and whimsical. So this is one of my ugly sweater decks. The only slightly ugly one. And the other really ugly one is this Zolar's Tarot, fortune telling cards. Now, I saw this at a place I worked, and it was an old used copy, and I just had to have it for some reason. I couldn't get it out of my mind, so I was able to find it online and pick it up. And you can see just the images, the coloring of the deck. It's actually a double-sided deck. So on one side I can see the majors and also elements and astrological signs. And then on the other side is like would be the minors or playing cards. And there's typically a short message to interpret. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are cringing at the teal and pink and black, and then on top of that I edged mine in black. So, you know, it's not a pretty deck. It's definitely ugly sweater deck. But, you know, it's cozy. It's worn in. It smells like it's been in an attic for decades. And I think it was published in 1963. So just takes me back to that time of pink booths at the neon aqua burger joint. So yeah, these are my two ugly cozy sweater decks. 10th prompt is worth a cackle deck. So I'm guessing a deck that makes you laugh. That's going to be the Visions of Life Tarot. And I don't know if I've seen anybody talk about this deck. Now, just a disclaimer with this deck and with all my decks, I definitely recommend that if anybody's interested in them, you find a video that does a complete walkthrough and really look through all the images of all my decks, because all these decks are not always inclusive. They can be a bit controversial and triggering for some. So I kind of put my favorite images at the front just so you can see why I like this deck and why it gives me a laugh or a cackle. I mean, look at this deck. Look at this card. Even the sorrow card is pretty hilarious. Kind of melodramatic. Yeah, so the faces, they're just kind of out there and exaggerated. This is definitely a satire of a deck, I feel like. I mean, for growth, we're just going to consume, you know, information. from outside of us. That's what I get from this. So it does say Visions of Life Tarot, but when I've used this, it's not easy to interpret or use as a tarot. It comes with a PDF book that I've downloaded, and there is a lot of information in that book. I wouldn't say it's skimpy at all, but I can only tell the major arcana. I can't tell which ones are the minor. I'm guessing the ones without the number, but even that doesn't make it really easy to interpret. So I would say this would be another major arcana oracle deck. And look at this marriage card. It's a prison. So stress. He's at the therapist's office. I feel like this deck, even though to me it's funny, the humor is funny. I mean, like whack, it's just gonna smack him with an ending. It's pretty, not funny. I'm sorry, not funny, but the image is funny. And so I feel like even though on a deeper level it's not funny, even though the image makes it funny, a satire, it's true. It's true. Like, you know, when an ending hits you, it often hits you. Sometimes, most of the time, out of nowhere, right? And that's exactly how it feels. When making decisions, you know, he's juggling his head with money to make decisions. And it often feels like that. Having insomnia. You know, the sheep are sleeping, but she's still wide awake, and the sheep are sleeping. They're off, so, you know. Even this card, stability, you know, kind of funny that the Cupid is put on the clothesline. But she's making the choice to put him on the clothesline and seeking stability rather than infatuation, let's say. So yeah, I mean, this is how I feel around Christmas time. Anxious, anxiety is often a shadow. We're lurking in the shadows. Our ambitions sometimes imprison us. This could be like an Eight of Swords type card, maybe. Harvest time. I remember seeing someone post about when it was harvest time, they just had like way too many, like I think it was tomatoes actually, and they tried to eat them and had to give them away. This disappointment card, you just feel it. So it's a common story. This touches on, you know, common themes in life in a satirical way. So yeah, this is the Visions of Life Tarot deck worth a cackle. The 11th prompt is Confronting Fear. My Confronting Fear deck is the Impressionist Tarot. And maybe a lot of you are rolling your eyes, but you know, this deck tells the truth. And often I'm scared to hear it. This is like one of those decks that I try to avoid. But at the same time, I love using it. When I do spreads, I love how everything kind of plays with each other and creates one large canvas of a story. And yeah, the borders are kind of gaudy, but I don't mind it. I definitely like this type of art in general. And there's a lot of masculine energy in this deck, I feel like. Definitely a lot of the readings I've gotten had a lot of masculine energy. I feel like it's definitely an easy read for me. And to be honest, this does have kind of like a sadness to it. It doesn't always leave me jumping for joy. That's probably why I avoid it. But again, I love it, I think. So that is the Impressionist Tarot. Confronting fears with this deck. It's not easy, but it does make it enjoyable. The next prompt, which is the 12th prompt, is the Harvest deck, or basically the deck that I saved up for. I would say that this is not a deck I saved up for, but that it is a deck that I had to wait for. And this is the Healing Waves Tarot. And I just talked about this deck in my last video, about how it was on Kickstarter. I don't think I knew at the time that it was just a limited production, and I passed on it, even though deep down inside I was like, I should get it. But at that point I was like, no more decks, you know. And you know, I could have gotten it for the quarter of the price that I purchased it, like a year and a half or 2 years later. And so it's got this beautiful edging here, great backs. And the Healing Waves Tarot to me is, how do I put this? It is watery, it is oceany. I can't tell you how many cards have jellyfish in here, and jellyfish is just one of the animals that I am hypnotized by, I think is a good word. I just love jellyfish, and so I love having an abundance of jellyfish in a deck that has a watery theme, and reminds me of my beloved ocean back home. And I love the soft finish of the cards. I guess some people might call it rose petally, but it's not the most rose petally deck I've ever had. It's not like the Dark Mansion. I put all the cards that I love towards the front. You can tell a lot of them are jellyfish cards. And I'm definitely one of those people who will get on YouTube and just watch jellyfish videos, videos of jellyfish swimming in the abyss. And so just love this card. Love this card. Reminds me of the birds. Love this card. I mean, there's I don't think there's a card in here that I don't love. Oh, I know what this feels like to be on a beach under a moon like that. So again, it's not a deck I had to save for, but it's definitely a deck I had to stock and wait for it to become available at a price that I was willing to pay for it, because I missed out. And I'm so glad I have this. And when I use this deck, I don't use the guidebook. So that's the Healing Waves Tarot, a Harvest deck. Not harvest feeling at all, but okay, so now we're down to our last prompt, number 13, Colorful Foliage, basically a landscape deck. I do have two for this category. The first one is Your Spiritual Journey by Jenny Smedley. Now, it says here soulandspiritmagazine.com, so I think these are like one of those decks that they include in like a pack with a magazine that you can get if you subscribed. But I purchased it online without a magazine, and so glad I came across it because it is beautiful. It's definitely a landscape deck. There's definitely colorful foliage in this deck. I want to live in each and every one of these cards simultaneously. And now that I live in a place where a lot of nature is abundant. This deck resonates. This looks like a birch tree. There's a lot of variety of message in this deck. This is like you're watching You've Got Mail and cuddling on the couch with your favorite blanket and a cup of hot cocoa or coffee, and you pull out this deck and you pull a card, you read the message, and you stare at the card, and then you decide, I'm just going to look through the whole deck. That's what this deck is to me. So that's your spiritual journey for a colorful foliage deck. Definitely harvest, October, fall vibes. The last deck, also for that same category, colorful foliage landscape deck, is the combined crystallary, herbiary, and bestiary deck. So it's a chunky one. And they don't match because I forgot which one it was. The herbiary guide. The herbiary deck came with a large book, and I think it's the one with the gold edging. And then the other two decks I bought separately. But this deck scratches that foliage vibe. I'm not sure why, but to me it feels very connected to earth and nature, and I love this deck. It's so much fun to journal with. It's got prompts in the book. It's so vibrant. I don't get bored of the cards. Each card is different. Each one has a very different message. And this does nature foliage in a not maybe cartoony, I guess is a good word, very well though. It feels very magical to me. Definitely up my alley. Okay, so that is my VR to decks for Witchy Desires, 13 prompts. Thank you to Auntie K and Peekaboo Rose for posting this VR. It was a lot of fun. Definitely got me out of bed really early in the morning, and I'm glad I was able to do this. I'm really motivated to share decks from VRs, and so this will be my first VR, official VR. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. So let me know in the comments if you guys like any of these decks. If you don't like any of these decks, let me know what you would put for different categories, or do the VR yourself. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely difficult. I had a couple decks for each category because I just couldn't narrow it down. I even left out additional decks, so I spared you guys. But so yeah, like, subscribe. I'll be having more content coming out, doing more VRs. I think that's what inspires me and gets me motivated, and also connecting with you guys. So I'd love to hear from you, and well, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.